Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Benchwarmers Sports Talk podcast. And today we are warming the bench in the NFL playoffs, as well as for the first time in a while, the NHL season, as that has kicked off. And we also have some NBA news to talk about. But rather, instead of what's going on the court, a lot of big off the court moves happening in the NBA, in particular one James Harden trade. All that will be discussed in this episode and a whole lot more. But before we get into that, let's introduce who I'm with. Of course, as always, it's Labi, and I'm joined by Jacob. Jacob, how are you doing today?
I'm well, Labi. Yourself, how's everything?
Yeah, can't complain. Things are looking good, especially with the amount of sports that have been on. We obviously, when everything shut down initially, it was terrible going without basically any sports, and now here we are where there's so much sports going on. It's almost like there's too much.
It's crazy to think that it's January. I'm 22 tomorrow, and I'm watching like hockey that just started instead of being like halfway done. It's wild to think of.
Yeah, it's definitely crazy, and yeah, we have a special birthday edition of the podcast, I guess you could call it.
We'll go
And
with we'll go with that for sure.
yeah, any way you can throw a special episode in there always works. And I guess the best place to start is to talk about a couple of your teams that you cheer for in the NFL, and you had one winner and one loser. But let's get
Yep.
right into the NFL playoffs. And for the first time in, I'm probably going to get the year wrong, but I think 1990, the Buffalo
95.
Bills,
1995.
1995,
Yeah.
the Buffalo Bills are in the AFC Championship game.
Yeah, and this game was a little bit more dominant than their divisional one for sure. Uh, yeah, Baltimore obviously looked pretty not good. Obviously, losing Lamar Jackson in the game does not make anything better. But if you watch that game, Josh Allen obviously looked like Josh Allen. He looked okay. They only won 17-3, but at the same time, this was a divisional round. My apologies. Oh yeah, that's what we're talking about. So like it was a win, but I don't know if it was super convincing. Now they got to play the Chiefs, who may have question marks around their quarterback, their star quarterback. Obviously being Patrick Mahomes. Labby, do you wanna tell us why they might have some questions?
Well, he had to leave the game late due to concussion protocol. I'm assuming he'll be good come Sunday.
I
And the Chiefs really hope that he'll be good come Sunday, because if he's not, then that's a really big loss for them. Although I think a storyline in that Kansas City game was the fact that the Cleveland Browns had a legitimate chance at winning that game, and quarterback by the name of Chad Henne. And, to quote Patrick Mahomes, anything is possible. And, you got to give credit to Chad Henne. He basically did exactly what was expected of him. Uh, and then some. I mean, if you talk about that 12-yard rush that he had
Yep.
and didn't get the
Yep.
first down, but it set up a 4th and 1 where they could go for it to kill off the game. And, credit to Andy Reid. That's one of the ballsiest plays I can remember going on in the NFL, especially in the playoffs. That's probably the ballsiest thing since the onside kick that the Saints did to start the second half of the Super Bowl way back in, like, that was like 2009,
Yeah, that
2010, I
that that
think.
was that was ballsy.
So for them to uh, snap the ball as they did, I think everyone thought they were just trying to draw them off sides. They'd call a timeout with 1 second left. They decided to snap the ball and run. What was a really smart play. I mean, they just bring Tyreek Hill out of the flat. It's an easy throw to make. It's a smart play, but just because it's a smart play doesn't mean that it's not a ballsy play, because it definitely was. But you have to give credit to the Chiefs. My question for you is, does this performance discredit Patrick Mahomes in any way? Because people are going to start saying, oh, well, clearly Mahomes isn't as good as everyone thinks he is. It's because of the system that he has. What are your thoughts on that?
The system does work and it does help, but most importantly, it works. Like same thing with what's going on in Tampa Bay. Bruce Arians, he's got a system. It's working. He's winning. Green Bay, they got a system. It's working. They're winning. So I don't think people are allowed to discredit Patrick Mahomes because he still technically won the game for them. He scored a touchdown himself and he threw another one. So yes, the Chiefs didn't play their best football, but to your point, Henny coming in and well, it's not his Henny's his nickname, but coming in and doing what he needed to do and more was incredibly important and extremely crucial in order for Kansas to win. You're right, that 12-yard run when it's third and 13 was probably the biggest, if not the most important play of that game because um he doesn't make that play, he doesn't make that run, he only gets like 3 or 4 yards and it's like third and 10. You can't you can't make that little simple throw to Tyreek Hill anymore. Now it becomes a bigger throw. And who knows how he was going to throw it because obviously he just came in for the first postseason appearance in his career. So it goes to show that, yeah, there's a system. Yeah, Patrick Mahomes is Mahomes, but it works. And I don't think you can discredit either of them. I mean, if I were the fans, I would actually look at it like, okay, we have a credible backup too if we ever need it. There's no reason that we need to be worried about what's going on. And like you said, Patrick Mahomes will probably come back. But at the end of the day, they got the win and they played better than Cleveland.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point to talk about Bruce Arians and his system because it's a system that didn't work under Jameis Winston, but it's working under Tom Brady. What's the common denominator there? Well, you can argue that they brought in more weapons to give to Brady, but, Jameis Winston had Godwin and Evans, and he threw whatever 30 interceptions or whatever it was. And so it is a combination of both. The system, obviously you need a good system in order to be successful, but then you also need a quarterback who can step in and execute that system. And so if anyone's going to try to discredit Patrick Mahomes, I agree with you. I don't think they really have the ability to do that just based on this game. What I will say, just to close the thoughts on the AFC before we switch over to the NFC, speaking of Tampa Bay, I'm going to give Cleveland a lot of credit this year. I kept counting against them. I kept trying to bet against them. I kept thinking that they weren't going to be able to continue. Um, I'm still not sold on Baker Mayfield as an elite quarterback, but I don't think that's the argument that we need to be having right now. I think that the question is, can the Browns be successful with Baker Mayfield at quarterback? And the answer to that question, based on this season, is yes. Whether he's considered elite or, whether he's A tier or B tier, I don't think that matters. Obviously, their run game is incredible. Their defense is very good. They have a lot of weapons that Baker can use. And so it's to the point where I don't think Baker Mayfield's holding back Cleveland at all. And I think they can be successful moving forward with him at quarterback, which I think is really good for Cleveland because, they haven't had they've had to deal with quarterback problems for 20 years. And so while I don't think he's the elite level quarterback that maybe they want him to be, I don't think they have to worry. And then with Baltimore, I mean, the Bills defense is good, but this year was more so the Bills were complimented on their offense. And yes, they do have a really good defense, but for Baltimore to only put up 3 points, that's really disappointing. And I know Lamar Jackson got injured as well, speaking of quarterbacks who had to go into concussion protocol, but Lamar played like 3 full quarters, more or less, and couldn't do anything. And the Bills did a great job shutting them down. I'm starting to get concerned about the Baltimore Ravens because this was a team where, people were predicting them to go like we were predicting them to have a really good season. Some people were predicting them to go like close to 16-0. And they struggled. They had to win their last 5 games to get into the playoffs to begin with. Then they, play well against Tennessee, but only win by 7. And then they only score 3 points in a playoff game. I'm not going to start attacking Lamar Jackson because it's not all on Lamar Jackson. This was a team performance very disappointing and a team performance a very disappointing season. So I'd be very concerned if I was a Baltimore Ravens fan.
Yeah, I don't want to say it's showing their inexperience in the playoffs, but this was only Lamar's third postseason berth. And yes, he left with a concussion. Obviously, that sucks. But it is concerning because you're expected. not only as like a franchise, but as a quarterback, you're expected to do unbelievable things considering what you've done in the past. And yeah, their game against Tennessee, I wasn't convinced. I really was not convinced about how they played, and it showed against Buffalo. I think it was them that only beat an over 500 team, maybe once or twice in the season. And you're right, they had a very, very shaky start to the season. Like they were questionable as to if they were even going to make the playoffs. So if that's a team that's um, in the playoffs, it's just a little concerning. I agree with you. Where does Baltimore go from here?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, the Steelers are probably taking a step back because even if Ben returns, he's not going to be good. If Ben retires, it's going to be hard for them to find a good quarterback replacement. So I think the Steelers are going to take a big step back. But like I said before, giving the Browns all this sort of compliment, the Steelers are always going to figure it out. Like even if next year they don't have a successful season, they'll be back sooner rather than later. And the Cleveland Browns look like they have it figured out. So where do the Ravens go from here? They're in a very tough division. Um, they have to find a way to be consistent each and every season because if you win 10 games, that might not be enough to win your division because the Cleveland Browns are in your division and they look pretty good. Um, and we've seen this season, the Miami Dolphins will tell you that winning 10 or 11 games doesn't even guarantee you a wild card spot anymore. And so for the Baltimore Ravens, they need to really work on being consistent because, like you said, there was a time where you didn't think they'd get into the playoffs. And then they need to work on delivering in the big game. I mean, in the Lamar Jackson era, they're 1-3 now in the playoffs. That's disappointing. And once again, I'm not putting it all on Lamar. I'm putting it on the team as a whole. They just need to be better.
Yeah, you're right. It's not just him. It's as a player, he is one of the best. As a quarterback, he's one of the better. Um, yeah, 1-3 in the playoffs is not good at all in the slightest. But at the end of the day, he gets you to the playoffs. He saved their season. Don't get me wrong, he saved their season. But you're right, Cleveland's on the up. Like it's a very tough division. The Steelers, I don't know where they're going. They're a little weird to me. As a Browns fan, I really, really don't like them. But as a football fan, you really, really don't like them because of how some of those players treat some of those games they played. Um, so yeah, you got to win like those divisional games against the Browns, against the Steelers, even against the Bengals, who might even be a very good team in the next 3 or 4 years. If
Yeah,
Burrow's
never
able to,
don't count out Joe Burrow. He's
no.
shown like he can be a very good quarterback.
Well, that's if he's playing. That's the whole problem is he's got to stay healthy. If he stays healthy and Cincinnati gets him an offensive line, then maybe the Burrows have a chance in the next 3 or 4 years. But unless you don't address those problems, you're gonna have the same prerogatory. It's gonna be the same thing. It's gonna happen. He's gonna get hurt. So if I'm Baltimore, if I'm Jim Harbaugh, I'm sitting down and I'm like, okay, what needs to happen? What do we need to do? How are we going to get better? Are we going to get better? Where are we going to go from here? Like, you got to figure out what needs to be addressed. So, Baltimore's got to address something fast, or they're going to be in trouble in the next few years.
I mean, it might be the end of Harbaugh's time. I'm not saying he's going to get fired this year, but I think you have to start taking a look at, like you said, how are we going to get better? There's not a lot of weaknesses in that roster in terms of areas where you can look at and say, we need an improvement here, we need an improvement there. Um, and so at one point, you have to start thinking, is the game plan the thing that's flawed? And there were moments in the season where Baltimore really mismanaged, like the situational football was mismanaged. And ultimately, that falls on the coaching staff. And at the end of the day, Baltimore is a team with Super Bowl expectations. And if you keep falling short in the playoffs and if you keep, not starting off strong in the regular season, having weaknesses exposed in the regular season, you might have to start looking at that as an option as well. But let's switch over to the NFC and let's talk about the battle of the ancient quarterbacks in I mean, Drew Brees won both regular season matchups, but when they meet in the playoffs, Tom Brady gets it done.
You can never, it does not matter what team you are on, but if Brady's in the playoffs, you can never doubt him. He is a completely different person than he is in the normal season. He I don't know what it is. Maybe it's like LeBron when he goes beast mode in the playoffs, but you cannot count this guy out. And look what happened. Obviously the defense came extremely clutch too, getting two interceptions in that fourth quarter. And Brady put up 30. Like there's nothing else you can ask for. Brady put up 30, the defense got 2 picks. There's nothing else you can ask for. The Saints, on the other hand, they're going to go on the downhill. They are going to be on the downhill from here. And here is why. This was their last shot at a Super Bowl, at conference finals. This was their last shot. Drew Brees will retire after this year. Correction, he will retire, I say, within the next 2 weeks. Before the Super Bowl, he'll retire. And he had everything. He had Kamara, he had Michael Thomas, he had an offensive line that was very, very good, as we saw during the normal season. I don't know what really went wrong, but throwing those 2 picks, he's 42, and throwing long bombs are just not what he does anymore, and he threw 2 longer throws, and it led to picks. So, uh, I don't want to say it's a wasted career. He did win the Super Bowl, but he could have won more than once. And I think that they may be on the downhill from here.
I don't think. I know that they're going to be on the downhill from here, and here's why. They are $100 million above the salary cap next year. So they need to cut $100 million. They need to free up $100 million worth of salary. Sure, Brees retiring is gonna ease some of that, but the team is getting blown up because it has to be blown up because of the salary cap. I agree with you. I'm not going to say that it's a ruined career, but I'm going to say that the last 6 years of Brees' career has been ruined. And if you look at the way that the Saints have gone out in the playoffs, some of it's been harsh with the referees when you look at that call again, not to bring up past seasons, but that Rams play, that's a penalty, blatant penalty.
Right, right,
The year
yeah,
before that, you let Stephon Diggs make a catch on the sideline, no one tackles him out of bounds, and he runs it in the end zone.
yeah,
So the Saints have had so many opportunities, and it seems like it's been said every year for the past 5 years. The Saints win their division. Everyone's like, oh, is this the year the Saints get back to the Super Bowl? And then for whatever reason, they can't. So yeah, it's tough to see Brees' career end that way. Uh, you know, he probably did deserve, another shot at a Super Bowl, but then again, when you don't deliver, I guess you
yeah.
don't. And like you said, the Bucks defense does deserve a lot of credit, but everyone kind of did their part. The defense played well. Brady did what he needed to do. At this point, Brady's not going to single-handedly win you the game, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers aren't built for Brady to single-handedly win you the game. They just need Brady to take, honestly, Brady at this age, all he has to do is be a good game manager, and the Bucks are going to be in with a chance to win. Here's the thing I'll say though, is you look at who they're coming up against in Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers, and I don't know. Because Aaron Rodgers went up against the number one defense in the NFL in the LA Rams, and he made them look like they were the Dallas Cowboys defense. He carved that defense up like it was absolutely nothing. And the Green Bay Packers are looking real good.
Yeah, yeah, but Green Bay has looked good for a long time, and what has happened? Like nothing. They've won how many Super Bowls in the span of 10 years, right? When they should have won more. So yeah, they look good. We say that every year. Aaron Rodgers had a chip on his shoulder. They drafted a quarterback when they had him, so like he had something to prove. So I mean, we say all the time, yeah, Green Bay's good. Yeah, Green Bay's great. They're in the conference championship. But if they don't win, it doesn't matter. It's the whole thing with the Saints. You can win your division. You can win the divisional round. Sorry, my apologies. But if you don't win that Super Bowl, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Yeah, and you gotta understand the Rams had Jared Goff as a quarterback, who was not supposed to play that game, had to come in with his still injured broken thumb because the backup got hurt. So they didn't really have much of an offense to work with. Yes, that does not take away from the fact that they got scored on 32 times, but 32 points scored on them. But you know, if you're not producing the like Ravens and Bills, the Rams at the score they have now would have beaten the Bills. Like they have enough offense to win. 18 points is enough, but when your defense is letting in 32 points, like there's a big problem there. And yeah, they're the so-called best defense in the league. Green Bay right now, I would say Green Bay and the Bills right now look the most overall balanced team in the playoffs.
Yeah, I would go Green Bay. And then, yeah, I mean, I never want to count out Kansas City. Buffalo does look good. Um, Green Bay put up 32 against the Rams. The way Rodgers is playing, he can put up at least 32 against the Buccaneers as well. And I think that if he does that, it'll be a big problem. Once again, I'm never going to count out Brady. But, I mean, like you said, Aaron Rodgers, he looks like he wants it. And, I mean, no disrespect to Tampa Bay, but you look at some of the perceived big teams in the NFC, the Saints are out, the Seahawks are out. I'm not saying that the Buccaneers are worse than them. They're actually probably about the same level. But, I mean, I think that Green Bay are kind of a step above those teams, and it really is on them. Like, the Green Bay Packers, given this situation, should take this opportunity, and they should get to the Super Bowl. Um, yeah, I'm confident picking Green Bay over Tampa. Kansas City Buffalo to me is a toss up. But all I do know is that we're going to get a very, very interesting end to the football season.
I mean, I've been saying the Chiefs are going to win it. The way they played last game, I don't think so. I think it'll be a Packers Bills Super Bowl championship final. And my oh my, if the Bills won, I might be drunk for about a month. Just a side note.
Yeah, I think that it all depends on whether Mahomes is healthy and at 100%. If Mahomes is at 100%, you have to give the Chiefs the respect that they deserve.
But you're taking away from the Bills and what Josh Allen has done and what that defense
Yep.
has done too.
And here's what I'm saying. If Mahomes is not 100%, I'm picking the Bills. And I think that even if Mahomes is 100%, the Bills have a legitimate chance to win. But I think that if Mahomes is 100%, I'd lean Chiefs narrowly. If Mahomes is anything but 100%, I'd think the Bills. And that's sort of my approach to that game. And then, yeah, I really do think Green Bay should win. But once again, it's Tom Brady. The Bucks have looked really good. I wouldn't put it past them. Like, I'm not here saying guaranteed Green Bay is going to win. But if I had to pick, I'd pick Green Bay. Although, you know, for those of you wondering, I did have the Steelers winning and I did have the Seahawks winning. So maybe my picks aren't the most trustworthy so far this year.
Yeah, no kidding. Yours have been worse than mine.
Yeah, at least when it comes to the NFL, they certainly have. But yeah, we hope you guys enjoy the NFC and AFC championship games coming up this weekend, and panning from a league that's almost done to a league that just started. The NHL season has already begun. We're about just under a week into the new
Yeah.
season, and it's been exciting to see hockey return. It's been exciting to see, how different it is in terms of teams are playing sort of back-to-backs against the same team. You're going to see a lot of the same matchups over and over again. What I'm going to ask you is what have been sort of two or three biggest stories from the opening week of the NHL season?
Um, Philadelphia looks ridiculous Ottawa is not as bad as people say they are, and the Leafs are winning the Stanley Cup. Okay, let me elaborate a little bit. Philadelphia looks like one of the best teams I have seen in such a long time. They are one of the most complete teams. Carter Hart is playing out of his mind. Konechny, Voracek, Gothisbehere, and we'll actually talk about Voracek in a second because something interesting happened with him with a reporter. Um, they are clicking. They may be older, but they are clicking, and they are clicking very effectively. Couturier, like all these guys are playing great. Carter Hart's out of his mind. Defense is solid. I mean, I don't see them. I don't see anything less than a play like a Stanley Cup, rush this year. I feel like this is a good year. I think Carter Hart's had a lot to develop. He made the Eastern Conference semifinals last year. Um, he could have gone further. A little bit of bad luck against the Islanders, obviously, but it is way not out of the question to say they are Stanley Cup contenders. Now, Ottawa is not that bad. As a Leaf fan, I've watched the Leafs lose and win to them in a back-to-back. Their first game I've noticed during the games is the Leafs control about 90% of it, but when Ottawa gets a chance, they are very, very effective at making you pay. If you watched the recent game where the Leafs won 3-2 and you looked at Tim Stützle's first National Hockey League goal, he batted it the second it touched the ground after it had hung in the air for about 5 seconds. Jack Campbell himself said after I was like, how did I let that in? I wanted to shake the guy's hand. And obviously they didn't win, but Ottawa is not a bad team. Matt Murray is proving himself. That young core is showing up, and the older guys are playing to their best ability. Ottawa, I don't think will actually come last this season. Now, I know that's very ballsy. Who's going to come in last? It's a stacked division. I think Montreal will, and I only say Montreal is because Ottawa has more complete of a team, whether it's complete bad or complete good, than Montreal does. Um,
That is
Mon-
that. Oh, there's okay. I'll let you finish.
I will. The reason why I say that is because when you look at Montreal's team, they have maybe 3 or 4 guys. Yeah, they have Suzuki, they have Paul, they have Petrie, they have Weber, and they have Price. Right, that's about 5 players. Let me pull up the
Gallagher, Deneau,
Gallagher.
Tatar.
Gallagher is a little washed up. He doesn't really produce as much as he does anymore. Who else do you know? I have not heard him do anything recently. I don't know what happened in his last game. I know they won 5-1. I don't know if he did anything. Um, they also played against an Edmonton team that. So if I look on the Senators, I'm pulling it up right now. You have Stützle, obviously. You have Tierney, who's winning a lot of faceoffs. It actually a serious amount of faceoffs. This is going to sound really weird coming out of my mouth, but Zaitsev has been playing well. Colin White has been playing well. Austin Watson, the guy who hit and hurt his wife, is playing well. Brady Tkachuk is Brady Tkachuk. We know what he can do. His tips in front are incredible. Matt Murray is the big story of that team. Why do I say that? Because a lot of people threw him away. They gave up on him. They did not want to talk to him. They didn't think he was
Penguins game up on him. I was always a Matt Murray believer. I think he's an elite goalie.
Okay, yes, fine, fine. You are one person out of how many people? He went to a bar. I've said this story many times. He went to I don't know, maybe it was you who told me, or it was one of my friends. I can't remember. Goes to a bar. Matt Murray's there, and the kid says, "Can I get an autograph?" The dad says, "You'll never be as good as Fleury." You guys gave up on him. Not you specifically, but Pittsburgh fans gave up on him. So he's going to Ottawa. He's got a chip on his shoulder, and no one expects anything from this team. And that is why they're better than Montreal's, because this is a dark horse team. Montreal people have expectations for. And when they don't live up to that expectations, they're disappointed. When this team doesn't have any expectations and they're doing this against Leafs who are questionably the best team in this division and they're beating them 5-3, like that says a lot about this team that a lot of people are not going to notice. It's a lot of these games that they win are going to go unnoticed, and Ottawa's going to sneak into maybe that 6th or 5th spot in the division. And I'm calling it now. Either they just miss the playoffs, or either they barely get into the playoffs, or they just miss the playoffs. And Ottawa, to me, is a very scary team.
All right, from my three storylines, I'll start with the one that's related to you and kind of respond to what you're saying a little bit.
Sure.
Um, and that is the Canadian division is wide open from what I've seen in the first week. Now, when you started talking about Ottawa and how you think Ottawa aren't going to finish last, I was agreeing with you until you said it was going to be at the hands of the Montreal Canadiens. The Montreal Canadiens, in the span of 5 days, beat the Toronto Maple Leafs and then annihilated the Edmonton Oilers.
Sure.
The Montreal Canadiens could win the whole damn North Division.
But you and I both know they won't.
I think they very well could.
I
If I
okay,
had to
continue.
pick a team that the Ottawa Senators would finish above, I'd pick the Vancouver Canucks.
I can I can agree with you on that one.
And
I
here's
think
here's what I think with the North Division.
yeah, go ahead.
So I came in thinking that it was kind of Toronto's a half step above, Ottawa's a half step below, everyone else is kind of in the middle. I'm sticking to that, but from what I've seen, this division is wide open. The Winnipeg Jets, it looks like he's hurt now day to day, but it looks like Line has decided to step up and be an elite scorer again. So the Jets could make a return to the playoff team that they used to be. The Calgary Flames look locked in. The Habs look locked in. The Toronto Maple Leafs are not the unbeatable team that I think a lot of people said that they might be in this division. They, struggled against Montreal. They struggled against Ottawa. It'll be very interesting to see what they do tonight against Winnipeg. But here's my thing is I don't think Toronto's going to struggle to a great extent where they end up missing the playoffs. I think Toronto's probably a lock to make the playoffs. It's just a matter of whether they win the division or not. Edmonton, boy, when Connor McDavid doesn't score 4 points, it looks like Edmonton won't win. And Connor McDavid's a hell of a player, and him and Draisaitl could single-handedly win games for the Oilers. But if that's the only way the Oilers are going to win games, then they are going to be in a lot of trouble. And I did not like what I see from the Edmonton Oilers in the first week of the season, because what I saw was in the game where McDavid and Draisaitl combined for 8 points, they win. In the game where they're held off the score sheet, they lose. And that is not a sustainable way for them to have success moving forward. So when I see the Canadian division is wide open, I genuinely think any of the teams could make the playoffs, with the exception of Ottawa, but I don't think Ottawa's a bottom feeder. I think that Ottawa could finish as high as 6th or 5th, maybe. I don't think they'll get anywhere near the playoffs because the division's too deep, but I wouldn't count Ottawa as an easy win necessarily. The second point I want to make is just talk about the start that the Minnesota Wild had to the season, which was a
Yeah,
ridiculous one. They fall behind.
what's going on with the Kings? That's concerning to me too.
They fall behind 3-1. The Wild in back-to-back games against the Kings. They come back and win both of them 4-3 in overtime. Look, the Kings are who I thought the Kings were. They're in a rebuild, and shit like that happens to teams that are in a rebuild. Drew Doughty's not an elite defenseman anymore. Jonathan Quick's not an elite goalie anymore. And the youngsters are going to have to develop on the fly. This is going to be a rough season for the Kings. I just kind of wanted to talk about how wild the Wild season has started. See what I did there? But
Hilarious.
especially that second game where they literally tie the game up with 1.4 seconds left in the third period. And can I talk about Kirill Kaprizov for a little bit? Obviously extremely talented coming over from the KHL. There were a lot of expectations on this kid to deliver right away in the NHL coming over from Russia, and I wasn't sure. Like, I know he's a good player. I wasn't sure if it was going to translate right away to being successful in the NHL, and boy, did it. He had 3 points in his first game, and it looks like he's going to be a really good player for the Minnesota Wild, who I picked to finish 4th in that division. I think they can make the playoffs, and I think that if they keep performing like this, obviously, you don't want them to have to come back from down 3-1, but you like to see the battle back, and hopefully they can start as strong as they've shown that they can finish. But Kaprizov looks incredible. And then the third sort of major storyline that I had is, the impact of COVID. Obviously, the Dallas Stars, I think, start their season tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. So it'll be good to see them finally get up to start their season. Interesting to see what the effect of all those COVID tests will do to them, whether they'll have a sluggish start or whether they'll be fine, and sort of how the taxi squad has impacted sort of injuries and also waivers. Aaron Dell got claimed off waivers, and Jason Spezza threatened to retire if he got claimed off waivers. And so it'll be very interesting because I think that that's going to play a much larger role this season. You're going to see a lot of teams sort of messing around with their taxi squads and waivers to deal with injuries, but also to deal with COVID. And the amount of goalies we saw moving around the taxi squad, obviously the Oilers had to put Mike Smith on the injury reserve, which is another reason why I think they might miss the playoffs, because I'm sorry, but putting all your eggs into Mikko Koskinen just isn't sustainable. and their backup now, I believe, I'm gonna blank on his name, but they claimed the goalie
Troy Grosnick.
Troy Grosnick, but then they also claimed Anton Forsberg from the Carolina Hurricanes.
Yeah.
Aaron Dell goes to the Devils, who of course had to deal with the surprise retirement of Corey Crawford.
Also, Spezza cleared his waivers. So
Spezza cleared his waivers, probably because of the threatening to retire. Because when I saw he was on waivers, I immediately was like, "Hey, Penguins, maybe you claim him." But obviously, it was intentionally done so that he would threaten to retire so he could stay with the Leafs. But I just think
Penguins look bad, eh? They don't look good.
Okay, well, if you want me to talk about my Penguins, I will.
Please go ahead. I'm all ears. That's what we're here for, right?
I'm not worried, is the short story. The long story is the first line looks good. The second line really started badly in Philadelphia, but I saw signs in the Washington game. I think Malkin just, not to stereotype Russian hockey players, but he tends to be a slow starter and he's a very streaky guy. But he was the best player on the ice in that overtime win against Washington. In the overtime, at least, obviously they won in a shootout. And the third line's been a revelation. I trust the fourth line. Any line with Teddy Bluger on it, I trust to be responsible defensively. Defensively is where we have all of our issues. Matheson is injured, so he's out. And first of all, to any Penguins fans out there, don't celebrate a guy's injury. Like, yes, I'm thrilled that Matheson is out of the lineup. Ideally, I want it to be by a healthy scratch, not because he's injured. So I'm not celebrating his injury. I'm just celebrating the fact that he's out of the lineup. But, you have people responding to the tweet saying he's injured of like, we care about your recovery. Take all the time you need, even if it means the whole season. And, that's disrespectful to the guy. Obviously, he's here to play hockey, and, you don't want to see him get injured. So, I hope that Mike Matheson recovers. And then I hope when he recovers, the Penguins realize that he's not one of our best six defensemen and he's a healthy scratch. Just like how Cody Ceci plays opening night and then is immediately a healthy scratch, which was the right decision. The defense needs to step up. I mean, Chris Letang, I'm concerned. I'm starting to put him in the Drew Doughty category of is no longer an elite defenseman. You expect that. I think defensively they just need to be less mistake prone, because in the two games against Philadelphia, a lot of the time the Penguins were carrying the majority of the play. They had more shots, but then they would make a really stupid defensive play and give up a golden scoring opportunity, and that cost us. So they need to cut that out. Especially because they're hanging their goalies out to dry. Tristan Jarry, I'm not concerned about, because ultimately the majority of the goals that he gave up were high scoring, like good high opportunity scoring chances. Now, should he have saved a couple of them? Sure. Jarry's the first to admit he hasn't played well, but I don't think that he's not an elite goalie or not the goalie that he was last year. And DeSmith is very competent as a goalie. He can come in and get the job done. So goaltending wise, I think we're going to be fine. We just need to shore things up defensively. And then also, Carter Hart's a hell of a goalie. We came up against a really good goalie in Philadelphia. We probably should have scored more than we did. We just need to clean up some details, special teams, defensive errors. I'm not worried. I mean, it's not ideal. Like, at the end of the day, we do have a 1-2 record, and there are a lot of negatives to take away. But I'm not going to hit the panic button after 3 games. I've seen enough positives to know that with the right coaching and the right adjustments, we can be right back.
Well, you got to make those adjustments. That's the thing is, are you going to be able to make those adjustments in time for the no?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's the right. And if you look at our upcoming games, we play Washington tomorrow. Then we have 2 games against Boston, and then 2 games against the Rangers. We beat Washington yesterday. We need if we beat Washington again, if we can get a split with Boston, and then if we can beat the Rangers twice, I want essentially that's what I want to see happen.
But here's the thing: is you look at Boston, and you're like, oh, let's win 2 games. You say a split, which means you already have some doubts about that series.
No, it's just being realistic. Obviously, I think we can beat Boston twice, but realistically, if we can come away with a split, I think that that's favorable because I think that the only teams that are better than us in this division are Philadelphia and Boston. So every game that the Penguins play essentially is a 2 game set. So I'm going to kind of look at it as I expect us to win every single game and get splits against Philly and Boston. So if we play the Capitals, the Rangers, the Islanders, the Devils, the Sabres, I want to win both games. If we get the occasional split, that's fine. But ideally, we play those teams 8 times. I want to beat them 6 times out of the 8. And then the
Right.
Flyers and the Bruins, I want to win 4 times out of the 8. Because if we do that, I know we will comfortably be, at worst, the third best team in that division. That's kind of the approach I'm taking with the games.
Rare, and I think it's a very reasonable approach too.
Yeah. And it's all about setting realistic expectations. Ultimately, the expectations for the Penguins are just get into the playoffs and then start winning in the playoffs. And I think the Leafs are this sort of the same case, right? You can talk about warning signs and, they play a flat game against Ottawa, but then they recover and play a really good second game against Ottawa and get the win. Obviously, those are issues that you can go through in the regular season. You're not going to play your A game every single night. The important thing is that you use the regular season, get into the playoffs, and then, when it really matters in the playoffs, get the job done.
My big concern watching this season so far is Frederick Anderson. Now, we got this guy in 2015, and, he was expected to be good, get us to the playoffs, which he did. We've been to the playoffs every year in the Freddie Anderson era. But 9 goals in 2 games. 9 goals in 2 games. That is not a good sign. Jack Campbell got us our second win in Ottawa. He played like Freddie did 5 years ago. So a lot of speculation is going around between in the Leaf fan not or in the Leaf fan organization, not the Leaf organization, Leaf fan organization. Will Campbell be our starter at one point during the season? And to tell you, I couldn't tell you because we're obviously Freddie has been the guy for years now, but he's not playing like the guy. He's playing like the backup guy,
Off
which
of a
he's
two
playing.
game sample size, it's really important to note that. And I'm
I
assuming
under,
Freddie
yeah,
gets the
no, no,
start
I
tonight
get
in
it.
Winnipeg.
Pardon?
I'm assuming Freddie is getting the start
Yeah,
tonight in Winnipeg. You know,
it's in Toronto tonight.
don't you have the confidence? I'm sorry, I mean against Winnipeg. Yes, they're playing in
Yeah,
Toronto. Don't you have confidence in Freddie's ability to play well tonight?
I've always been very confident of Freddie. I know he can get us to the playoffs. It's just a little concerning because we're only 2 games in the season. You think everyone is ready, is like he should be playing like Matt Murray has been playing. Matt Murray's been playing really, really well for Ottawa. He should be playing like that. He shouldn't be allowing 9 goals when half of them are soft. Like, to me, Frederick Anderson reminds me a lot of Jonathan Quick without the cups. He was a really good goaltender in Anaheim, really really good. He was their guy and there was no question. He came here, he was the guy. He was winning us games left and right. He took us to the playoffs and he has ever since. And then he chokes. So, he can get us to the playoffs. This is a whole like situation. He's like the Jake Gardner of goalies. Why? Because Jake Gardner could get us to the playoffs. He just could not play very well in the playoffs. So I'm not worried. I'm worried. I'm a little worried tonight, considering we're going up against one of the hottest goaltenders in the league in Connor Hellebuck. I'm more concerned long term. Can we make the playoffs? Yes, I think we can. Can we go any further than the first round? This year, yes, I think we can. But can we go any further than that? I don't know. Because a lot of it really does depend on Freddie. Look at last year. We had a very good chance in that game 5. Well, I mean, we didn't really have a chance. It was kind of over in the second period, but we had a chance in that series. And Freddie let in a few soft ones, and yes, he doesn't let very many in, but when he does, they are the ones we need him to stop. So, right now, I'm not concerned. You're right. We're 2-1 on the season. We're sitting up there at first in the division. Um, I'm not terribly worried right now. The only time I will be worried is when we get to playoffs or if this becomes a increasing trend, which is a very unsettling trend for me. Like if Tristan Jarry starts going on this really really bad streak and Casey DeSmith comes in and does like wins like 6 games in a row, aren't you going to be a little concerned that maybe DeSmith will be the starting goalie? So for me, it's like I can see Campbell as a starter. I just don't think Freddie will give it up that easy. Like the Leafs have 11 goals against. I mean, granted, we have 11 goals for, but we have 11 goals against. Canadians only have 6. Flames only have 4.
Carey
Ottawa only has
Price,
6.
Jacob Markstrom.
Because of Jacob Markstrom, who is incredible this year.
Well, and here's the thing, right? I don't think that like Frederik Andersen is the starter. Jack Campbell is not getting the starting job in Toronto. The question becomes is can the Toronto Maple Leafs succeed with Frederik Andersen? And here's the thing when it comes to playoff time. And I was talking earlier about why the two teams that scare me in the East Division are Boston and Philadelphia, and it's because those are the two teams. Forget talent-wise. Obviously, I think the Flyers roster is more talented than the Penguins. I think we're pretty even with Boston. The difference is I trust Boston's goalies. I think that
Halak and Rask.
I don't think Tristan Jarry is going to steal a series. I think he can be very solid in a playoff series. He can't steal a series, and that's why I'm worried about Boston. And that's why when I talk about the North Division, I predicted the Leafs to finish first in the division, and I think they will because over the course of the season, they will be the most successful team. The reason I didn't pick them to come out of the division in the playoffs is because if you look at the potential opponents that they could play, Hellebuck has the capability of stealing a series for the Jets, Markstrom has the capability of stealing a series for the Flames, and Price has the capability of stealing a series for the Habs. And as much as, Leafs fans love Frederik Andersen because he's provided stability at goaltender for 6 years, like you've already said, you've been very critical, as you should, of his performances in the playoffs, where he was out-dueled by Tuukka Rask twice against the Bruins. He was out-dueled against Braden Holtby in Washington, although, to be fair, that series the Leafs did play probably about as well as they could. But twice against Boston, you had an opportunity. He was out-dueled as goaltender. You lose in 7, and he was out-dueled by Joonas Korpisalo.
Yeah.
And you lose to the Blue Jackets in 5. And I think that's sort of the big turning point where the Leafs kind of realize that maybe they do have a lot of issues. It's not quite just, what are you going to do? We came up against Boston. It's one thing to lose a goalie battle to, Tuukka Rask. It's another thing when you're losing it to a guy like Joonas Korpisalo. And so I agree with you in terms of I understand why you should be worried long term. The solution is not going to be Jack Campbell going in at starting goalie. The solution is Frederik Andersen needs to figure it out himself because the Leafs are going to go as far as your defense and your goaltending is going to take you.
Yeah, and if they're not going to play well, like I can see if Freddie goes 1-2 in the first 3 games of a playoff series against, I don't know, Montreal, per se, I would not be surprised if Jack Campbell got the start in one of the games.
Yeah, I agree with you. I can see it going that way. I just don't think that'll make a difference, though.
I mean, the way Campbell's been playing compared to Freddie, it can make a huge difference. When I look at the two, I look at Freddie and I look at Campbell, and I watch both their games. And to me, Campbell, his positioning seems to be a lot better. He seems to be more maneuverable. He seems to be able to move around. Well, what does more maneuverable? Move around the net very easy, and he seems to be willing to do like ridiculous kind of saves in order to make the save. Freddie doesn't seem like he wants to do that. Freddie doesn't seem like he can do that. He hasn't shown to me yet that he can do that. He did it when he was first here. He was all over the place in that crease, which was great. It was bad, but it was great. He just it kind of seems like he's kind of going through the motions. And that's kind of bad to say, considering he's your main starting goalie who's supposed to take you to the playoffs and, quote unquote, a Stanley Cup. So, what Freddie needs to figure out is how to play in these tough games. Like these 1-1, 2-1 games, you need to close these out.
Absolutely. Those are the games that in the playoffs, you have to win the 2-1 game, the 3-1 game in order to win playoff
100%.
series, in order to win Stanley Cups.
And that is what separates a winner from a loser. A goalie, a winner from a loser goalie is, it's 2-1 Toronto going in the third.
Yeah, it's making the timely saves. It's making the timely saves. And you're absolutely right that Anderson, especially in the playoffs, has let in the wrong goal at the wrong time.
Correct. There's really never a good goal to let in.
No, of course,
the playoffs.
Yeah.
But you're right. Look at last year, Columbus, Game 5. He lets in such a weak goal on the short side. The dude was like almost behind the red trapezoid. Like, it was ridiculous.
And that essentially killed the series, because at that point the Leafs just didn't have the confidence that they thought they were going to score 3 goals, which they did, and that's why they didn't score 3 goals.
And if you go back a few years, the first time we played Boston, Game 7, the Leafs are leading 4-3 going into the third. We're going to beat Boston, and Freddie lets in 2 very soft goals. One within 10 seconds, a minute of the period, and Jake DeBrusk gets a stupid 5-hole goal in, beating Gardner and Freddie. You absolutely cannot make those mistakes, especially when it's a Boston-Toronto first-time rematched. Like, it was brutal.
Yeah, and that's the margins between winning and losing. That's the margins between winning a championship and losing a championship. And, that's why teams make those bold calls to go for the championship. And, yes, that was the best transition that I could possibly do to get from the NHL to the James Harden trade in the NBA. So let's get into that. The Brooklyn Nets are going all in for the championship. They acquire James Harden from the Houston Rockets and a second-round pick from the Cleveland Cavaliers. And then
it's a wild trade. Oh my god.
The Rockets get Victor Oladipo, Dante Exum, Rodion Kurucs, 3 unprotected first-rounders from Brooklyn, an unprotected first-rounder from Cleveland, and 4 pick swaps from Brooklyn. The Pacers get Karis LeVert and a second-rounder, and the Cavaliers get Jarrett Allen and Taurean Prince. If you guys are confused, all that matters is that the Nets get James Harden, the Rockets get a boatload of draft picks, the Pacers essentially swap Oladipo for LeVert, and the Cavaliers, for whatever reason, acquire another center. Your thoughts on the giant trade?
A lot of people are saying the Nets didn't win this. A lot of people are saying it. I think right now the Nets won this. Why? Because they are looking this year. This is the year that they have to win. This is the year that they want to win. This is the year they have the best chance to win. So, right now, as of now, the Nets are 5th in the East. They have what's the record? 8-6 record. Not a very strong East as it should be. They are going all in. I'm 100%. They are going all in this year. I would not be surprised. How many is it? A full 82 games? No, it's like how many games is it? 60 something?
I think it's 72.
72. So I can see them winning 50 games. 45 to 50 games this season, because now you have
They
KD.
They could win 55, close to 60 even.
Yeah. Oh, you could push. Oh, 100%. Yeah. Oh, and because you have KD, you have Kyrie, which he's got his own issues going on.
You kind of don't have Kyrie at the moment, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know what's going on with Kyrie. I don't think anyone really does. I don't know I don't know what's going on with him. I really don't. But listen, you got Kevin Durant, you got James Harden, you got Joe Harris, DeAndre Jordan. Like, you got all these excellent players that need something. And this James Harden is the perfect example of what they need. KD, he's a big man. He can shoot. Cool. He's great. But he's mostly going to be in the paint, I would assume. James Harden, now that Kyrie is out, he's going to slip into that point guard position, and you can even move him to a shooting guard. Like, obviously we know this, he can make threes for days. So that's good about Harden is now because Kyrie decided to be Kyrie and go off a little bit, go a little loopy off the track, is he can move into that point guard position, and depending on how he plays, could push Kyrie out of that point guard position, which is not what Kyrie wanted. He wants this to be his team, which has been his whole issue his entire career. So I think right now the Nets absolutely in perfect position. I think in 5 years they are in big trouble. They are in big trouble when KD, Harden, they're both on their downfalls. They're both a shell of what they used to be. They lose all these first rounders. I think they will be in big trouble if they do not win in the next 2 to 3 years.
No, absolutely. I have a couple thoughts on this trade, and it makes the most sense if I go team by team.
Sure.
And then I'll talk about sort of winners and losers. Because I did a poll on my Instagram, and I think 75% of people said that the Nets win, and about 25% of people said that the Rockets win. Starting with the Nets, obviously, you know what the whole thing was. They wanted to get James Harden. They realized what it was going to cost. They bring him in. They're going all in. They probably have, I think, maybe 2 really good chances at the championship in the next 2 years. The draft picks are the draft picks, but that sort of goes into the Rockets, and I want to save them for last. But the Nets did what they wanted to do. They wanted to get James Harden. They got James Harden. For that reason, Brooklyn wins in terms of they accomplished what they wanted to. The Pacers, I think people are really sort of, obviously the biggest news is the James Harden deal. I think the Pacers did a really good job of swooping in and saying, hey, because Oladipo is a hell of a player. But he's coming off of a lot of injuries, and the Pacers realize that they essentially need to get into a rebuild. And so the fact that they were able to get Karis LeVert out of Victor Oladipo, I mean, I'm not calling it an upgrade, but LeVert, potential-wise, could be as good, if not better, than Oladipo. And the Pacers realize that with teams like Boston, Brooklyn, Milwaukee, they're not going to be competing for a spot to represent the East in the NBA Finals anytime soon. So you look at the players that they're slowly building in Indiana, add Karis LeVert to what is looking like a pretty solid young core. I think that's a big win for the Pacers. And the Cavaliers, a lot of people are sort of clowning them for acquiring another center. But here's the thing, you can never have too many valuable players. Jarrett Allen, whether it's Jarrett Allen, whether you now have a great opportunity to flip Andre Drummond to another team, and all it costed them was Milwaukee's first round pick. Cleveland keeps their first rounder. They throw in a first round pick that they have from Milwaukee next year. If that's all it costs to get Jarrett Allen, I'm not going to be clowning Cleveland at all. Does it improve their ability to be a good basketball team by acquiring a third center? Probably not. But Jarrett Allen's an upgrade, and so my question is less on, why is Cleveland here? My question is, if that is the only thing it costs to get Jarrett Allen, where the hell are all of these other teams who need another piece to become a contender? Like, if all it costs is a first rounder, who's a team that really needs a center? The Toronto Raptors. I would have been very okay with giving up 1 first-round pick to get Jarrett Allen onto the Toronto Raptors, and then you can flip Aaron Baines or Alex Len or both of them. So the fact that no other teams came in for that and to get Jarrett Allen for that little of a price, fair play to the Cavaliers. And like I said, you can never have too many, tradable players, valuable players. The Cavaliers now have the ability to flip one of their bigs to get prospects or draft picks in return. So they, from a, team standpoint, from an off the court standpoint, in terms of the management of the team, are in an improved position. Now the Rockets. I have sort of two looks at this. It seems like the 76ers were willing to give up Ben Simmons in a trade package.
Hmm.
And because of that, I can't call the Rockets out and out winners because as much as draft picks are valuable, and they got a hell of a lot of them, draft picks are not a surefire thing. For all we know, those draft picks are all going to be 30th overall picks because Brooklyn wins the next 3 championships, right?
Right.
Or even if they're not, they could draft bust after bust after bust. Ben Simmons, say what you will about his inability to shoot, and I clown Ben Simmons all the time on his inability to shoot the three because when I say my three-pointer is as good as Ben Simmons, like it's not, but like it's not that far off from the truth, which is
Right.
hilarious. But like
No,
Ben
which
Simmons
it's so funny.
is an elite player, and you can't deny that. He's one of the best defensive players in the league, and in and around the paint, he's incredible, and he's a incredible playmaker as well. The Rockets, if they had the opportunity to get Ben Simmons, I think that it's bad that they didn't. But here's the reason why I'm not going to be too harsh on them. The NBA, unfortunately, is a league in which their players have way too much power. And I think what ended up happening was James Harden went to the Rockets, and he didn't just say, I demand a trade. He said, I demand a trade to Brooklyn. Make it happen. And unfortunately, the NBA, the players literally have that amount of power where essentially they can choose where they want to go, even when they're under contract to a team. And so I don't think the Rockets had a choice. I think that the Rockets were essentially had their hands tied and had to negotiate a trade of James Harden to the Brooklyn Nets. And under that pretense, I think they did about as good a job as they could. The package that they got in return with all the players that they got, including being able to flip Victor Oladipo on top of that, I mean, you get Karis LeVert, you flip him for Victor Oladipo, and you get essentially 7 years worth of draft picks. I don't think they could have done much better from Brooklyn. I think that if it was an option, they probably should have traded him to Philadelphia for Ben Simmons. But if what I think is true and that their hands were tied and they had to trade him to Brooklyn, I kind of think I see this as like a win-win trade because Brooklyn have their super team that they want. The Rockets got about as good as a deal that they could have gotten out of it. The Pacers saw an opportunity to get younger and offload Victor Oladipo for a very good return and did it. And the Cavaliers saw an opportunity to pick up an elite young center, and they did that as well, and it didn't cost them too much. And so this is a crazy take, but I look at this 4-team trade, and I think all 4 teams are winners.
Yeah. I just think Brooklyn will be the losers in 5 years. That's all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The Brooklyn, it's a win on the assumption that they can turn this into a championship. Because, like you said, you can't evaluate these trades until talking way down the line. So Brooklyn, as of right now, it's a win because they got the super team they wanted. Ultimately, whether it's successful or not is going to be dependent on whether they win a championship. The reason why Raptors fans are happy with the Kawhi trade is because it turned into a championship. For those of you who don't know, I was highly critical of the trade because I was a huge DeMar DeRozan fan, and I was of the belief that with LeBron out of the East, I think that Lowry and DeRozan would have been good enough to make a run at the championship. Ultimately, I don't care because Kawhi came in and won a championship. If Kawhi came in, they didn't win a championship, and then he left, I would have been so critical of Masai Ujiri and all of it. Like, the trade was a win because they won a championship. That's going to be the same thinking here in Brooklyn. It's only a win long term if they get a ring out of it. Just like for the Rockets, it's only a win if they hit on these draft picks. If they keep drafting bust after bust after bust, they're just going to look at, okay, what did James Harden turn into? Oh, here's a bust. Oh, here's a bust. Oh, here's a guy who was supposed to be elite, but now he's just an average player. So that's going to be the whether it's successful or not for Houston is purely off of what ends up happening with those draft picks. The Pacers and Cavs, I think it's for the Pacers and Cavs, it's a lot harder to judge long term. I think for the Cavs, the success long term is going to be, who they trade because of getting in Jared Allen, which essentially I think is going to be Andre Drummond. If they can get a first-round pick back for Andre Drummond, then the Cavs win this trade and then win this trade again. Pacers, it'll be interesting to see where they develop from here.
Yeah, oh man, I couldn't agree with you more. I'd like to see, because Oladipo spent most of his career there, so I'd like to see how he does. I can't remember where he's going. I know you said it. I totally forgot.
Houston.
But Houston, thank you.
So
Right,
it's
he's going to Houston.
John Wall, Victor Oladipo are now the Houston Rockets.
So it could work out, but I don't see Houston doing very much. I can see them making the playoffs, but that's probably about it.
Yeah, actually,
Otherwise,
the Rockets find themselves in a very interesting position because, Wall isn't young, but he's also not that old. People forget
he's hurt,
how
but he's
good
not
Wall
that
can
hurt
be.
anymore. Like, sorry, he's hurt, but he's not that hurt anymore. He's washed up, but he's not that bad. Like, yeah, I agree. They're in a very interesting situation.
Yeah, Victor Oladipo is 28. So if he can stay healthy, which obviously he hasn't been able to, but if he can stay healthy, you know that when he's at his best, he's really good. John Wall's 30, which, isn't young, but it also isn't old. And so you talk about the picks that they have. They have an extra pick. They have a pick swap in 2021, two firsts in 2022, a pick swap in three firsts in 2022, and a pick swap in 2021 and 2023 in the next 3 years. In the next 3 years, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 first round picks. And obviously, we don't know where those picks are going to be. But if some of them are in the lottery, if maybe they use the 5 picks that they have to trade for a star to bring them in, maybe they trade up to like a top 5 pick. And if the Rockets can get an elite young player or use the draft capital that they have to bring in a guy, look at what the Thunder did. A lot of people thought that the Thunder were going to be garbage when they got rid of Durant, Westbrook, and Harden. A lot of people thought that the Thunder would be bad last year with Chris Paul, and because they draft well, look at all the young talent that OKC has. If the Rockets can do that in the next 2 to 3 years on top of Oladipo and Wall, they might have just done a New York Rangers rebuild where they said they were rebuilding, but it didn't really look like one because it was so fast.
Right. No, I mean, it can go either way with them. They can be either really underdog team that does a lot, Cinderella story maybe, or they can actually be like dog shit this year. But we'll never know until the season plays on.
Yeah, we just have to watch it play out. And I think the biggest thing about it is, I don't think anyone thought that the Rockets with Westbrook and Harden were going to win a championship. So I don't think like Houston Rocket fans are that disappointed with this trade because I don't think they believed that they were going to win a championship with James Harden at the center of it.
Yeah, that's weird to think of too, is he was in Houston for so long and now he's gone. It's kind of gonna be like Chara in a Caps jersey. Seeing Harden's in a Nets jersey is gonna be the weirdest thing ever.
Yeah, although in his debut he looked damn good. He had a 32-point triple-double, and Harden had and Durant had 42, and they won
So you
pretty
know what that said?
comfortably.
You know what that says to me? That says he didn't want to play in Houston anymore. He did not want to play there. He didn't care about the atmosphere. He didn't care about whatever. He wanted
Absolutely,
out. He
absolutely
wanted
true.
out.
100% agree with you.
And I don't know if I can really blame him. They've been losing for so long, and now he goes to a team that is winning. So, and it has a lot of potential. So I'd be like, yeah, I'm out too. Screw it. I don't want to be there anymore. And he got what he wanted, and he's playing. You know what? He's shutting everyone up. That's what he's doing.
Yeah, but ultimately, like we've both said, the ultimate shutting everyone up is going to be if he can deliver that championship. So
Can he
as we
bring that
wrap up here,
championship?
any closing thoughts on the NBA or just anything else that we talked about today?
The New York Knicks in 2021 are doing significantly better than the Toronto Raptors.
Yeah,
That's
then I
that.
think the
Yeah. What?
Raptors just need to blow it up, and maybe next week. Hopefully by next week the Raptors will have improved even better on that record. But we can spend some more time. Obviously the dominating news was the Harden trade, so we wanted to focus on that. But maybe actually quickly we can do sort of 3 headlines very quickly that you've seen in the beginning of the NBA season.
Harden trade, biggest story. Kyrie decides he doesn't want to do anything. I don't know if it's for personal reasons or he's actually just being kind of a jerk. And the Toronto Raptors suck. There's no way about it. They suck. They overpaid, underplaying, performing players. Wow, that's a tongue twister.
Yeah, I
They
mean,
unpaid,
yeah,
underperforming players. There's no other question about it. Siakam is playing like garbage. Lowry is playing good. He's like the greatest. Him and Boucher and Van Vliet are like the only right now are the only defining um, players on that team, which is not good. Lowry is old. Van Vliet, he's playing up to his contract, and Boucher is Boucher. Like I'm not taking anything away from him. He's just he's not the star of the team.
yeah, yeah, completely agree. My three headlines are, well, one, I'm just going to call it off the court madness. I think that includes Harden trade, Kyrie Irving, sort of everything going on with that. Number two is that a lot of perceived weaker teams are doing really good. For reference, Indiana's 8-5. The Knicks are basically 500, which doesn't sound good, but in the Eastern Conference, that's good enough for the 6th seed. The Phoenix Suns are 7-4. The Spurs, out of nowhere, are 8-6 when everyone thought that that was the end of a dynasty. And then
Yep.
talking about elite teams, it's not just the Toronto Raptors. The Golden State Warriors are 500, which I feel like isn't being talked about enough. And yes, they're injured beyond belief. Klay Thompson is really hurtful to that, but
Well, it just goes to show the dynasty they still kind of have there.
the Warriors are only 500, and then also Toronto's 4-8. The Miami Heat are 4-7. So obviously it's still very early, but obviously the Raptors are not the only struggling team that a lot of people thought would do well. And I mean, you did well to highlight the success of the New York Knicks. Shout out to the Spurs, the Suns, the Pacers for also having a pretty strong start to the season. But like we said, it's still early, and there's still a lot more basketball to be played. And we hope you'll check in with us every week, and we'll talk about the biggest storylines in the NBA, as well as the teams or storylines that have caught our attention too. But for now, we want to thank you for listening to another episode of the Benchwarmers Sports Talk podcast, and we will see you again next week. Jacob, your closing thoughts.
Thank you guys for keep tuning in. We do it a lot for us, but we do it even more for you guys so that you guys have some entertainment. So we appreciate you listening every week.
Yep, and starting next week, we'll try to come back to our regular Sunday afternoons episode coming out. Unfortunately, this week we were a little bit busy, so you're going to have to get a Monday afternoon episode instead. But for
Yeah,
next
deal
week,
with it, people. Deal with it.
we'll try Sunday afternoon. But yeah, like Jacob said, thank you again for listening or watching. Whether it's on YouTube, give us a thumbs up. Whether you're listening on Spotify or Apple Music, throw a 5-star review and give us a follow. And other than that, we will see you next week.